Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Reviewing Comics with me, your host, Alexander Turbin. Today we're going to be going over a comic book that's near and dear to my heart, Grendel #1 by Matt Wagner. But before we get into that, I want to real quick show you my own books. This is Random Access. It's a full-size, full-color comic book. You can get these at patreon.com/Alex Turbin or Alexander Turbin. I can't remember which one it is. But you can also check these out at my website, alexanderturbin.com, or you can message me at alexturbin0441 at Yahoo, which is my email. But if you do that, message me because a lot of times my mail goes into spam folders and I won't get it for quite a while. And I apologize if I don't respond to something because that was mostly the reason why. Or you can just contact me at Instagram at alexturbin0441 at Instagram. So Grendel. I got these. I got the first one and second one through a fantastic trade with obscure.cmx at Instagram, and I'll have his link in the profile because he has some really fantastic stuff for sale. And it's really, if you like my kind of stuff, then you're probably going to find his stuff that he sells fantastic because it's a lot of the same indie 90s, 80s, different genres and different cool stuff like that. So a huge shout out, huge thank you to him, and go to his site and check out his live claim sales and stuff like that because they're always usually something great to find. So Grendel, my first exposure to Grendel was Grendel Devil by the Deed, not this one. This is the Dark Horse version. I actually had the Comico version, which was a regular graphic novel the size of a Marvel graphic novel, and it was probably my favorite graphic novel of all time in that format. It's just it was like slick in certain places and felty in other places, and it had a fantastic introduction by Alan Moore, and I didn't know who Alan Moore was at the time. I hadn't read Dark Knight, so really Grendel was one of my first forays into a darker superhero realm, even though Grendel isn't a superhero. So let's backtrack a little bit, and as I've discussed this a little bit on the Turbo Pit Fighter live stream that we did on Sunday, and so you guys should check that out. But really, Grendel he's a villain, but it's deeper than that. It's more than that. And one of the fantastic things was I thought that this Grendel was this came later. I thought that this was a just like a coloring and a retelling of this story, which it is, but it's really a reimagining, redoing, recreating. Just it's completely different. But there's so much to love about this, and I probably am going to have to break this into maybe two videos or something like that because I want to get to this one, and I'm not going to go over this at the moment. I just kind of want to show the differences in how Matt Wagner's style grew and how his writing grew and all of that stuff. So let's just take a quick glance at Grendel #1. So I thought that this was a reprint of Primer #2, but apparently it's not. You can get all of these compiled in the Grendel archives, which I'm going to get. I didn't even know that thing existed, but I'm going to go get it because I believe that's a reprint of Primer, and it's I think that's an introduction to Grendel, and I think it's a different story, and it's not the same thing. So Grendel, in the beginning, it doesn't tell you a lot of stuff, and it really talks up to its reader in such a way that you don't get really lost or confused. Although I could understand if you hadn't read any Grendel before and you didn't understand what was going on here, then you would get a little confused. But I just kind of want to go through this real quick and show you some of the stuff that he did. This is the original one back in 1983 that he did, and then he said, "Well, I'm not happy with that," and that's like my rough draft. I've heard him say that that's like my rough draft of Grendel, and this is actually the final version. I've talked about on the Turbo Pit Fighter podcast how it's a great blend of text and visuals, and it's like breaks through the comic book medium because there are panels. I mean, you've got all of these different little panels, but it's all done in text. There's no word balloons. And actually, in the next Grendel iteration, the Christine Spar iteration, there's no texting. Text, it's all word balloons. It's all just people talking. So if there's one thing about Matt Wagner is that he's creative and he's adventurous and he tries new things and he explores the comic book medium, which is fantastic. One of the things that Alan Moore discusses is the all of these little weird things that he puts all over his pages, and like, what the heck is that? I believe in the original graphic novel, these are different colors and they're not all red, which I don't know if all of them being red is on purpose or not. Actually, now that I've never actually read this because I have a couple copies, but I picked one up especially because I had gotten rid of the original graphic novel for some idiotic reason. And I just wanted a reader copy or something. I wanted to have it because, I love the Grendels, all of the Grendel stories. But really, the dark color, I don't think that a lot of this stuff is printed correctly or as well as the original graphic novel. I am definitely going to have to get the original graphic novel and compare it again because I think some of the coloring is just a little bit off and a little bit different from the original graphic novel, which is really too bad. It's super avant-garde and it just has this 80s, 90s vibe to it, which is really fantastic, like super avant-garde and new age art and all of this kind of stuff, almost like an Andy Warhol inspired comic book or something like that. So let's get into Grendel number 1 because we haven't even scratched the surface of it, and I'm really interested in doing that. I am going to go through the Dark Horse comic book / graphic novel at some point, and it is super wordy, it is super high in text, but it is so engaging and interesting and fun to read that it blows you blow by it. You've read it and you're like, hey, this just read like a regular comic book for me anyway, and I believe for a lot of people as well. So first thing I want to do, I want to read this little introduction by the publisher. Doesn't really have anything to do with Grendel, but I think it's probably the best introduction I've ever seen in a comic book, and I might copy this down and kind of have it on my Instagram or something like that as a comic book creator and a comic book publisher and all of this stuff. Decisions can be easy to make, especially when you categorize and segment them into a progression of dichotomous choices. When choosing a comic book to purchase and enjoy consistently, issue after issue, you may categorize them based on creativity, originality, cover design, quality of artwork, storytelling, price, believability of characters, entertainment value, potential, etc. Once the categories important to you are chosen, you then rate the comic books which are available to you for your discretion, one category at a time, progressing from a one of the other choice of bad versus fair versus good versus very good, and finally very good versus excellent. Thus, through process of elimination, you choose an excellent comic book based on your personal standards and taste. Now, I haven't been to the comic book store in quite a while, my LCS, just because they're kind of far from where I live, and they have kind of weird hours. But anyway, even when I went there, it was not like being a Wednesday warrior. I was a Wednesday warrior, and cartoonist kayfabe, I think, may have quoted or created that terminology, and I kind of think they think of it as a derogatory thing. But I loved my Wednesday comic books. That was my favorite time. My favorite day of the week was Wednesday comics, and I would go in there once, probably. I mean, I would go Wednesday, but then other days I would be going in there looking for different things and that's when I would get my new my indie stuff and stuff like that. On Wednesday, though, that was when I picked up my usual stuff. That was when I delved into the world of Wolverine and Nightcrawler and Kitty Pryde and lived their lives, or of Grendel, the second series that I picked up with Christine Spar and all of that stuff. And when you're a Wednesday warrior, I'm taking that back. I'm taking it back. I'm owning it and I'm loving it. And if anybody thinks that being a Wednesday warrior is a bad thing, then too bad, because I love it. I love comics coming out on every Wednesday. There's a cliffhanger in a comic. You go there on a Wednesday and you grab it and you've consumed the cliffhanger and you're ready for the next thing. It's something great to look forward to. It's fantastic art to look forward to, hopefully. And it's just a wonderful thing. And I really, truly miss it. And I believe a lot of people have gone away from the Wednesday Warrior kind of thing. And I really, it's a sad thing, missing from my comic book life. And I'm kind of going to think about going back and reviewing a single new comic on a Wednesday, so I can at least go to the comic book store every Wednesday and enjoy that way. But I would do this with the decisions of all of my comics that I would get every Wednesday. I mean, I had my titles that I would pick up every Wednesday. I had my X-Men, my Thor, my Daredevil, all of that stuff. And, it would have to really, the art and the writing would really have to deteriorate in my eyes in order to let go of that issue, not pick it up or whatever. Or if I, found something new, like say I picked up Slain, the Horn God, I'd be super excited about it. I'd be intensely excited about it. Just because it was something new and different and like that I could consume and enjoy and everything. So I would also do that in my ranking of the comic. Like I would come home and I would have 15 comic books and I would rank them, in order of least desirable to most desirable. And I would read the ones that were least desirable to the most, the exciting ones that I really wanted. Like the X-Men were always last. And depending on the art or the writer or the storyline or however much I was into it, I would take first or whatever. And I think a lot of comic book readers and consumers were like that, and I really miss it. And that's just my little rant on that. But as a comic book creator, we have to be cognizant of all of this stuff that he's talking about. You have to take in to consideration the categories or creativity, originality, cover design, quality of artwork, all of that stuff. You have to take every little bit of that into consideration. Because if a fan is going to look at your cover and then open it up and be like, I don't like the interiors or whatever, then you have to adjust a little bit to kind of, make the adjustment to make your comic book more desirable to everybody else. So that's my little rant on creating comics and what we should do as creators, because I feel like a lot of you guys out there are creators of comics. And even if you're not a creator of a comic, you're one of the brotherhood of comic book creators. Even if you don't create comics, because everybody who reads comics wants to make comics. If you feel like you haven't hit that art level or whatever, or you feel like you can't draw, you've still tried it. And I fully applaud it. And you're still part of the community. And I love it. And I just applaud everybody. So let's get into Matt Wagner's Grendel. So you probably wouldn't know this, but it starts off with Grendel, and he's talking to his arch nemesis. Grendel is a villain. He's the head of a mafia family, a mob family. He's taking control of most of the mob bosses in New York City, and he is. I'm going to just spell out what he is and everything. If you haven't read Grendel, here is your notice that I'm going to ruin a lot of stuff. And so if you're really not into being ruined, then please stop watching now. Unfortunately, I don't want to lose viewers, but I can't really go through Grendel and not ruin some of the stuff. So Hunter Rose, the original Grendel, is he's a super intelligent, has a super memory, can memorize anything, eidetic memory, I think it's called, what it's called. And he and Argent, who is he's a good guy. He's actually a good guy. He's like a werewolf creature, and the werewolf creature has been after Grendel and his mob bosses and his henchmen and stuff for their whole careers, and it ends up where they have had it comes to a head where they kind of think they know who each other is, and they decide to have a final fight between them. They've had all kinds of different battles previously where one would lose, one would win, and Argent would just kind of go back and lick his wounds, or try to figure out who Grendel is and what he can do and stuff. So they meet on a rooftop, and they it's basically a Death of Superman kind of deal where Argent kills Grendel. He's talking on the rooftop. They're both talking, where he has had a death blow. He is dead. They both know it. They should have shown, if Matt Wagner had wanted to make that a little more plainly, he would have had more blood coming off of Hunter Rose or Grendel, I think. But then it also would have lost its Art Deco look and the big blocky buildings and the way that he drew at the time. That a lot of that is his youth. His art style changes quite a bit. He is super inspired by manga and anime and stuff. I mean, you can see the big eyes, and he started out as a super anime manga guy, and then he just kind of developed his own path. He developed his own style, and thank God, because I do like this kind of stuff, but he evolves into such a fantastic artist. So they have this final bout. Argent has delivered a death blow to Grendel, and Grendel it's not a death blow, but he's paralyzed Argent. And so that is basically, it starts from the end. This is the ending of their relationship as bad guy and good guy, villain and hero. And so they just decide to kind of, they know they're both messed up and nobody's going to help them or anything. And so they just lay it out on the line. This is like Lex Luthor and Superman, or Batman and the Joker, and Batman takes his cowl off and says, "I'm Bruce Wayne," to the Joker, and the Joker is like, and they just kind of have this conversation about where they've been, how they became who they are and stuff, which is really truly what happens, because Grendel talks about how he became who he is. He whips out off his mask, and Argent says, "You're Hunter Rose." Hunter Rose is very famous. He's Stephen King. He's basically the Stephen King of the world in Matt Wagner's Grendel. And Grendel is like, "I'm going to tell you my whole backstory because I respect you." Because even though they hate each other, and Argent at some point says, "I do hate you," but he respects him. They both respect each other in a phenomenal way. Unlike how Batman and the Joker in The Killing Joke, they show a little bit of respect. Superman and Lex Luthor, they don't really have a respect for each other. They just have a loathing. But these guys have a mutual admiration and respect for each other, which it really shows and really entangles you into the story. There is a lot of text, like I've said before. Even in this one, this is word balloons and stuff. There's no word balloons in the other one, which is actually, I think, the best way to go. I think that Matt Wagner took all of his experiences that he's done through all this with the Art Deco and the layouts and the word balloons, and he twisted it and turned it and moved it around like a Rubik's Cube. I believe in the Alan Moore introduction to the original graphic novel, that's what he says. He says something about a Rubik's Cube of possibilities and the different brain brain waves and uses of our brain that we use, and how Matt Wagner, like everybody else, is thinking about groceries and rent and job and girlfriends and stuff. He's thinking about comic books. He's got that Rubik's Cube of comic books in his brain, and always twisting it around and moving it around, and trying to get that perfect alignment. And I think he did with the Grendel graphic novel, but this is just the tip of the iceberg, and him learning his craft and becoming a better artist and a better creator, better designer, because that's one of the huge things, is that he becomes a great designer in this. So it kind of goes through. Grendel talks about how he was Eddie. His first name was Eddie. Doesn't say last name, which is a little bit interesting. And then he talks about how he had an eidetic memory, and everything came easily to him. And much like Mage, which I think Grendel and Mage and Kevin Matchstick are kind of just the same person, only they have a little bit of differences, because he describes his parents as ineffectual, and they were like, you can do whatever you want, we understand. But they really didn't understand, because he was such he uses a higher potential, or a higher he uses more of his brain. I'm trying to think of a good word to it. But he uses more of his brain. He's like a mutant. I think he actually says that he's a mutant, a freak, and that he just uses more of his brain. That's where he gets the eidetic memory, and that's where everything comes easy to him. He's super bored with everything, and he finally finds a couple of things that he's really into, and one of them is fencing, and he's really great at fencing. And this is probably the only real part of the story arc that I don't really think is that fantastic, because he's a world-renowned fencer, becomes an Olympic champion. I think he wins gold medals. He was like 14. He's in Europe. He's defeating the best fencers in the world, and yet people don't really know who Eddie is, because when he becomes Hunter Rose later on, he becomes the author and famous producer or whatever, and people don't recognize this white little stripe in his hair, which doesn't really make a lot of sense, because if you're an Olympic medalist, people are going to know who you are, especially if you're that fantastic. People are going to gravitate to you and try to figure out who you are and what makes you tick and everything. So he encounters this woman. This is another thing, that one of the things that he transitions from this comic into the way that he does it in the graphic novel, is everything is a little bit more impactful, because it's done in a narrative way, because it's done in a novelization of a way. It feels a little bit deeper. He introduces Jocasta Rose, Jackie. In the book, she's mysterious. She's mystique. He talks about her in a hushed tone. She's just this glamorous, wonderful woman who is just unattainable and everything that any man could ever want. And yes, it's done pretty good here, but she is very humanized here. And in the graphic novel, she is almost like a goddess or some sort of angel or something like that. Also, the body, he's a young artist. He's learning his craft. His bodies look very anime, manga-ish. So yes, he looks like a 14, and yes, she looks like an older woman, but it doesn't have the impact, the gravitas that he does in the later books. So it's really unusual and fantastic. This is probably one of the things. This is one of a few of the panels that he took from here and put it into the graphic novel there, where they're kind of discussing how old she is and whether it bothers him, and because she sought him out because she was so impressed with his fencing skills, and she just realized that this was a special kid, even though he's only 14. Then they learn chess, or they play chess together, and they kind of talk about reality and humanity and what everybody wants to do in their life. And she's like, what's really important, which is, this is kind of a Conan thing. She's saying that it's not lovers, it's not material possessions, it's nothing like that. It's the game. It's winning the game. It's winning at life. It's winning at everything you do, and taking on all of those different challenges and overcoming them. You can see here hints of what Matt Wagner is going to do later on in the graphic novel, because he's got the game here, he's got the game here, he's got the game here. It's all of this avant-garde, new wave, new art deco kind of thing going on with the duotone, duo shade, or whatever it is, and just the way the panels laid up. So there's like a hint of what he's going to do, and then he just pulls it all together. So he's finding out a little bit. This is the first issue. I have the second issue, and it's mainly explaining Grendel and Hunter Rose. In the second issue, I believe, he talks about Argent and where Argent came from and who he is. And I'm definitely going to go through that as well at some point, probably in the next month or so. I don't want to get overly Grendeled in here. But he's Grendel's talking about how much he loved her and how passionate he was, and have you ever loved anybody like that? And Argent says yes, I have. So he's really surprised about Argent in a lot of ways, because when Argent realizes that he's Hunter Rose, he's like, oh yeah, are you a fan? And Argent says, everybody at one point has read an Argent Rose book. And Grendel is like, I didn't know you could read, because he's a werewolf kind of creature. And he's like, whoa, that wasn't an insult. I just didn't know anything about you. And really, we don't know anything about each other. We've been enemies for so long, and yet we don't know anything about each other. And that's really an odd way to be. And so that's when he really decides to go into his background and everything. I think the fact that he's dying and Argent is crippled, I think that's supposed to be a surprise, like a surprise ending. And in the graphic novel, it's about halfway, I think, or so. So you're not really surprised about it. So he talks about how, or Argent surmises that Jocasta Rose dies. And Grendel is a little bit taken back. Like, is it that obvious that that's what happened? That's one of the things that formed my life. And Argent's like, yeah, it is. So yeah, she has some sort of disease. She had it when they met, and she didn't tell him, so they fall in love. He falls head over heels deeply in love with her, and she dies of this cancer or whatever it is. So even though he's heartbroken, he's devastated, he knows that she would not want him to give up on the most important thing to them, which is the game. And so he moves on to another facet of the game, which is he's going to take on the crime lords of New York City. But he starts off where he's just going to become an assassin. That's not really plain right here when, excuse me, when he is talking about becoming an assassin. He's just saying some of the things that, like, the seedy underbelly of society, and he just kind of hints at it. He's not like overtly like, I become an assassin. I kind of wish that Matt had put a little bit more of an indication that that's really what he meant. He says, like, the first guy was no trouble. The second had a little more fight in him, but not much. This doesn't really portray or paint a picture of him being in a fight. Maybe it could have had a little bit more action to it, where it actually shows the fight scene, where none of this is actually a fight scene. There's a couple fight scenes later. But then it goes to the next scene where it's a mob boss and he's talking to an assassin, but apparently Grendel had taken over this assassin's target and killed him before he had gotten to him. And this guy's like, he thinks he's the greatest, and there is no one better than me. I'm the best there is. God damn it, I'm the king. And that's when Grendel comes by and attacks him and kills him and makes him the new king. So he becomes an assassin for quite a while. He's writing more books. He's the belle of the ball. He's done it all. He's rich and powerful and famous. And but he wants more. He wants to complete the game. He wants to win the game of life. And so this is just one little facet of upper crust society. He's part of it. He's the Bruce Wayne of New York City, and like he's rich and powerful, and everybody knows him. And but somebody that recognizes him as Eddie finds him at a party, and he takes him back behind the top of the building or whatever, and kills him, and leaves a G because that's his calling card. So then later on, he's somewhere, and there's a ledger, and he thinks that it has all of his information about what's been going on and stuff. He gets doused with some sort of tear gas or a sleeping gas or something. I think it's a knockout gas. And then these two henchmen come by, and he wakes up, or he was never asleep. He probably has nose filters in there, because that's what he says actually in the graphic novel, that he has nose filters and stuff like that. If he doesn't say in the graphic novel, I think Christine Spar actually says it in the regular comic book. Here's a fantastic 2-page spread. So even though Matt Wagner has done all of this quiet stuff, all of this story techniques, and all of this really great progression of how the story is going and all that stuff without a lot of action, here's some really great action, and the poses and the just the fight scenes is fantastic. I love it. He corners the main mob boss. Thank God that he learned to differentiate people other than just like a big jowl or something. But he comes to the mob boss, basically tells him that I'm taking over your territories. There's nothing you can do about it. If you give me a hard time, I'm gonna kill you, and that's it. And so in Grendel, so much of, because there's so many things that you can talk about or take away from the Grendel comic books. But one of the things is aggression and hate and evil. It's an exploration of good and evil, and violence, and mostly it's violence and what causes it, and what forms it takes and stuff like that. Argent is a good guy, but he's hyper violent. He's like, in here he says, you've killed 46 of my guys. I think he says 46. Is it 46? 42 of my men, and 36 you've maimed or crippled or whatever, and that was not in self-defense. You're just overtly violent. And what do you call that? And Argent says a curse. He's cursed to find and destroy evil men or evil creatures or whatever. Not creatures, because this is not really fantasy. It's really just Grendel, and there's one little aspect of fantasy or science fiction or something in it, and that's Argent. So they finish their conversation about who Grendel is, who Hunter Rose is, and then he asks him, Argent, who are you? So that's going to be in the next issue, which I will definitely go through, because Argent is a fantastic character, as well as Grendel is. One of the great things about Matt Wagner's writing, he's done so much stuff. He did The Demon, which is one of my favorite iterations of The Demon. He did a bunch of Batmans. He did Sandman. He helped Neil Gaiman create the Ghost Boy detectives. He did Sandman Noir, or whatever it is, where it's not the Neil Gaiman Sandman. It's something else. It's the original 30s Sandman. So he's done so much crazy stuff, so much wonderful stuff. Kevin Matchstick and Mage is super fantastic. But Grendel is probably the most dear to my heart, and I love it the most. One of the things that I love about his writing, because I love his writing and his art equally, I think. It's really hard to say, because I'm such a visual person, but I love my comic books mostly because of the writing. If it doesn't have great writing, I'm probably not going to keep reading it. But like I say, time and time again, is a voice, the voices of the characters and the voices of all of the different characters, whoever they may be. He's got all of these characters have different voices, and it's fantastic. But it's an overlay. He's got an overlay of of a narrator and the narrator's voice, which is Hunter Rose's voice. In the graphic novel, it's actually Christine Spar's voice as the narrator because she comes in later on. But it's this overarching narrative and individual unique voice that is so astounding in the comic and so prevalent in the writing, and one of the things that really makes it fantastic. So I'm losing my voice, but I just wanted to share this with you, and I give this a 10. This is a 10. Matt Wagner's art is a 10 for me. I love it. Stories is a 10. Characters are a 10. Everything is just really the pinnacle of comic books for me. It is everything that I want to be aspire to as a comic book creator. So I heartily recommend it. This is a little pricey. The second one's the early Grendels are a little pricey. So I would recommend you go get the archives. That's what I'm going to do because I don't have the third issue of this, and I don't have the primer number 2, which I think is not this. I don't think this is just a reprint of primer stuff. I think primer is different. I'm going to go get the archives. It's like $30 on eBay, and it seems like it has a lot of good quality material in it. Excuse me. But anyway, Grendel, 1983, from Comico, and Matt Wagner does everything. Does the writing, inking, penciling, plotting, everything. And it's just fantastic. I heartily recommend it. And I give it a 10. If you guys are new to the channel, please consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. And give me a thumbs up if you would. But more importantly than any of those things, if you're into Grendel, let me know. Because, excuse me, I love to hear from you guys. And thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you next time, and keep on creating.